So in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about the gauge swatch, which is very important when you start a new project, because if you need a gauge, it will give you the exact size we need for our project. Every time we start a new knitting project, we should always create our gauge swatch first, because this will give us the accurate size we need for our project. On every yarn label you can see that there is this sign that explains how many stitches you need in order to obtain a 10 by 10, that means a square gauge. So for example, for this yarn, if I wanted to create a 10 by 10 square, I would have to, according to the label, to use 15 stitches for the width and 23 stitches for the height. Of course, this is not always the exact number of stitches, because knitters differ in the way they hold their yarn or the tension they have. So it's always a good idea to knit a gauge swatch before you start your project. Usually what we do is to try to create a square 10 by 10, or if you measure in inches, that will be like 4 by 4, in order to know how many stitches you need for every 10 centimeters of your project. The best thing to do, of course, is to knit the stitch pattern that you are going to use for your project. But for now, for this tutorial, I knitted this stockinette stitch pattern. Another thing I didn't do is to cut off my yarn when I finished this square, let's say, because you never know, you might want to use this yarn again. So I didn't cut my yarn off. Of course, if you prefer, you can cast off your stitches and cut your yarn off. So how we measure our gauge now? What we do is to measure the width and the height. So now let's zoom in on what to measure for our 10 by 10 swatch. So let's measure our width first. In order to measure the width, you can use a ruler or a measuring tape. I'm going to use a ruler for the width and the measuring tape for the height. So as I said, we are going to measure 10 centimeters or around 4 inches. The first thing we should do is to place our ruler on our swatch, but in order for your measurements to be more exact, it's a good idea not to place the ruler near the edges of your project, because they don't lay very flat. So you need to place the ruler like this. You can use your stitch markers or a safety pin. I'm going to use this safety pin in order to mark the beginning and the end of your measurement, where you should start measuring and where you should stop measuring. So for example, my ruler is number 1 is here, so I'm going to place my safety pin here, and I'm going to place my other safety pin or stitch marker on the stitch where number 10 is on the ruler, like this. And so now I can take away my ruler, and what I need to do now is to count the stitches which are between the two safety pins. If you feel confident, you can do it without using safety pins or stitch markers, just pressing the ruler down and count the stitches. So now, how we count the stitches? Let me try to zoom in more to show you what you count. So if you look carefully, you can see that each one of the stitches creates a kind of V. So what you need to do is to just count each one of these V's. So, for example, I'm going to count the V's I have from here to here. I need 14 stitches in order to obtain a width of 10 centimeters in this project if I use the same yarn and the same needles. It will also be a good idea to double check the count of your stitches, so you can place the ruler elsewhere and then count the stitches again. And in this way you know how to calculate how many stitches you need in order to obtain the width of your project. So for example, in order to get 10 centimeters of my project, I need 14 stitches. In order to get 20 centimeters of my project, I will need 28 stitches. If I need 30 centimeters of my project, I will need 42 stitches. So what you really use is the mathematical rule of proportions, and there are a lot of calculators on the internet that you can do it quickly and without having to trouble yourself. And now I'm going to show you how to measure the height of your project. Of course, the height is always easier because usually in patterns they give you the centimeters of the height and not rows, but you always need to check the stitches you need for the width of your project. So now I know how to obtain 10 centimeters for the width of my project, and I need to do the same for the height of my project. In order to do so, I will place my safety pin or stitch marker here, let's say, and then I will measure 10 centimeters in height. So from here, in order to obtain 10 centimeters, I will have to reach this row. And if I count the V's in between, I will get 17 stitches. So that means that in order to have a 10 by 10 centimeter square with this yarn, with these needles, because also the size of needles plays the role, what I need to knit is 14 stitches for the width and 17 stitches in height. Of course, I can always double check and try another place to count stitches. So let's say from here to here, so it I get 17 stitches again. So now I know that in order to obtain my 10 by 10 square, I need to crochet 14 stitches in width and 17 stitches in height. And this is the way we use our gauge swatch. I hope to see you soon in one of my next videos. If you liked my tutorial, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Bye for now, and always think positive. Thanks for watching.